Hey class, so in this video, I'm going to talk to you about what is on the Unit 2 assessment. I'm going to review with you what we discussed in class on Friday in preparation for the exam. The assessment has 3 topics on it. The first one is to draw products and leftovers from a given reactant drawing. This can be practiced in the limiting reactant PhET. It can also be practiced by watching the video that I am posting along with this one in the guidance document. You have to be able to write sentences from a chemical reaction. Both of those topics, the first 2, are not in this video. The third one, from a given amount of reactants, determine the limiting reactant, the excess reactant, the amount of product formed, and the amount of excess remaining. Remember, the term excess refers to the word excess. It's just a short way of writing it. And remember, the word excess means having too much of something. So the practical use of this information is to think of cooking like you do with chemistry, or think of chemistry as you do with cooking. So you have this chemical reaction here, or a recipe, of 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of sugar, 1 egg, making 10 cupcakes. And you have a different amount of ingredients that are in your cupboard and in your fridge. So what that means is that one of or multiple of the ingredients are going to run out and some are going to be left over. If you're thinking you're going to make cupcakes on an industrial scale, this kind of manipulation or calculation is actually really important, because then you actually save money. You make more money when you manage your ingredients mathematically. So, how do you determine what the limiting ingredient is, the one that runs out first? Well, you take what you have and you divide by what you need, and you get a ratio. And that ratio is, whichever one of them is lowest, that tells you the limiting reactant. That is the reactant that runs out first. So, you take your 10 cups of flour that are in your cupboard, and you divide it by 2 cups of flour. And that tells you how many times you can run the reaction according to flour. And that would be a 5, right? 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then you take your 6 cups of sugar, and you divide by 1 cup of sugar, and you get 6. That means you can run the reaction 6 times if sugar was the only concern. Then you take your 12 eggs that are in your refrigerator, and you divide by 1 egg, and you get 12. So according to the eggs alone, you'll be able to run the reaction 12 times. But of course, you can't run the reaction 12 times. You can't run the reaction 6 times. You can only run the reaction 5, because that's the one that's the lowest ratio. That's the relatively lowest amount of ingredient among all 3. That means that is the limiting reactant. It also means that the sugar is in excess and the egg is in excess. So think about, what can you determine using the limiting reactant? Well, you can figure out from the LR how much product you're going to make. You can also figure out from the LR how much excess remains. But you can only do that once you know what the LR is. In this case, it's flour. So we start with 10 cups of flour, because that's how much you have in your cupboard. And this is actually the mistake I made in second and third period. In second and third period, I put a 2 there, and no one caught my mistake until I was trying to explain it later and realized I had told second and third period wrong. Again, you can figure out how many cupcakes you're going to make based on the amount of ingredients you have, based on the amount of limiting reactant you have. So that's the flour. You can use that to determine the cupcakes. So we have put cups of flour on the bottom, and we put cupcakes on the top. And if you notice from the chemical reaction, there are 10 cupcakes and 2 cups of flour in the chemical reaction. So we put 10 up there on the top and 2 on the bottom next to the cups of flour. So it's 10 times 10 divided by 2, and that's 50 cupcakes. So you can make 50 cupcakes based on the 10 cups of flour, the limiting reactant that you have. So you can figure out the amount of products that you make. The other thing that you can determine is the amount of excess that remains. And we're going to do that on the next slide here. So, we have 10 cups of flour. Again, you can only do these calculations with the LR. And we're going to figure out how many eggs that we need for that 10 cups of flour. So you put cups of flour on the bottom, and you put eggs on the top. Now think about the logic of that. Why are we solving for eggs? Because for every 10 cups of flour, we need to know how many eggs we use. So this is the eggs that we use. Well, again, you look at the recipe, and you see that there's 1 egg and 2 cups of flour in the ingredient side. 1 egg, 2 cups of flour. So it's 10 times 1 divided by 2. That's 5 eggs used, but that's not the leftovers. That's how much is used in the process of cooking cupcakes or baking cupcakes. So how do you figure out amounts that are left over? It's subtraction. Think about when you buy pizza and there's 8 slices and you eat 2, there's 6 slices left over. That's the leftovers. It's always subtraction. So it's 5 eggs used. We know that we started with 12 eggs, right? We bought a dozen at the store. And that leaves us with 7 eggs left over. And actually, these are the 2 answers that we can get from knowing the limiting reactants. We could actually get another answer. We can do the limiting reactants for the sugar as well, but it's the same calculation. So we can figure out the amount of products produced, 50 cupcakes in this case, and we can figure out how many eggs are left over. We use 5, so we have 7 left over. Again, to practice the other 2 parts of the quiz, you can do the limiting reactant FET. Make sure you do screenshots so I can give you homework points for that, and record the approximate time it takes. You can also watch the video that's with this one on the guidance document, and it can help you figure out how to do those drawings and write those sentences in preparation for the assessment on Monday. Thanks. Have a good day. And if you have any questions, please ask.